Right now, you're going to see that notification. So we are recording as of right now, and we will share this, provided that there's no technical issues that destroy the recording. We all know that happens sometimes, um, but I don't think it'll happen this time. All right. Hello, folks. Again, this is Sergey and Vadim from School16. I see that Carl is here, Carl Narcisse, our speaker for today. Thank you, Carl, for joining. And we also have 61 of you on the call right now. Thank you so much for joining this class, our inaugural one for School16. I'm seeing hellos from Connecticut, from Georgia, Chester, Newark, New Jersey. We hope all of you are staying home and staying safe. We're doing so responsibly. That's why we decided to launch this program fully remote, and it will always stay fully remote because we want it to be accessible for everyone. We're seeing people from Afghanistan and Morocco. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. I don't even know what time it is right now where you are, but if it's late at night, I thank you so much for joining and taking the time to join this session. Dominican Republic, Calgary, amazing.
So we'll actually turn on our video right now so you can see a little window with our faces there.
Where's the video? Here we go. Okay, here we are. Great. So, got it. Okay. And by the way, we are monitoring the chat here, folks from NYC. That's where Vadim and I are. We got someone from Karachi, Pakistan. Amazing. Florida. Great. Okay. So just a quick introduction from us before we hand it over to Carl. So I'm Sergey Revzin. This is Vadim Revzin. And just a little bit about us and why we decided to start School16. So Vadim, why don't you really quickly start and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Vadim Revzin. You have been receiving all the email communication from me. So it's really great to have you all join this session. So both of our backgrounds is actually in tech. As a matter of fact, early on in our careers, we decided to leave finance and get tech jobs. And that has contributed a lot to our progress and has created a lot of opportunities for us as well. And we believe strongly that it can create opportunities for a lot of other people too. Not only is it one of the more resilient industries, even though right now, obviously things might be a little bit different, but it is one of the more resilient industries and obviously one of the more flexible ones too. So we've done a lot in our careers. Right now, I'm a professor at New York University and also at State University of New York, where I teach entrepreneurship and management. And obviously that meant that starting an education company makes a lot of sense for me.
That's right. And this is Sergey speaking. By the way, our voices sound exactly the same. We host a podcast. People tell us all the time they can't tell the difference. We don't mind if you can't tell the difference. By the way, I hear a phone call. I'm trying to mute everyone. I can't mute some folks for some technical reasons. So if you can just mute yourselves and just allow for us and for Carl to be unmuted. But as for me, right now I'm a venture capital investor at the NYU Entrepreneurial Institute, where I invest in up-and-coming technology companies started by students and faculty and administrators. Vadim and I have both worked at a bunch of different tech companies in a lot of different roles: sales, product, account management, you name it. And we moved from that now to more the venture creation side and the teaching side, the professor side. We also have started a couple of companies together. So we may be a little bit biased, but we love tech. We got into tech, transitioned from finance actually during an economic downturn. And once the economy started picking up, so did the opportunities. And that's why we wanted to bring these programs to you. What is School16? School16 is committed to helping educate people like yourselves about all of the opportunities in tech and about how you can acquire the right skills to be attractive to technology companies. For those of you that either want to transition into tech jobs, or for those of you that are currently in a tech job but you want to level up, so to speak, and increase the amount of opportunities. We are committed, again, to offering these weekly sessions to you for free for a reason. Carl from Slack, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you being one of our first speaker, our first instructor. We have an amazing speaker next week, a VP of Sales, Vice President of Sales at Google, Daisy Paulus, and we're going to continue bringing you weekly classes, completely free, where you could join every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. We will probably actually be offering more than one a week as well. But this is just the beginning. And it's critical for all of you to continue coming to these sessions, weekly sessions. We'd love for you to come to at least one a week, at least for the first month, to see how it goes. And then after that, we are going to be directly based on your feedback. We are going to be creating more robust programs and skills development programs, even beyond these free weekly sessions. So it's critical for us to hear from you. We're going to be sharing a survey at the end of this conversation, and we'll ask you to fill out that survey, and in exchange, we'll send you the recording and the notes afterwards. But the only way we know that you came here is if you fill out that survey. It'll take 1 minute, but it's just so important for us to get that from you so that we can continue improving this program and creating something beyond even these weekly free sessions.
So right now we're actually going to stop sharing the screen, and hopefully you all can see our faces. So we're going to wave to you. If you didn't notice yet, we are identical twins. That's right. We both have beards. I did grow mine first, so Sergey's a bit of a copycat, but that's okay. I guess beards are in style, and we are in New York City, where there are a lot of hipsters. But we don't want to take too much of your time. We have Carl here, who you should see on video as well. Carl, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. And hopefully everybody else can hear Carl. And Carl was, again, gracious enough to be the first one to kick off these sessions. And actually, part of the reason why we really wanted to make sure to have Carl here is he is a technical recruiter. He has been working with people for quite a while, evaluating their talents, trying to understand how to bring them into a company like Slack and obviously other organizations as well. And what better person to start off this conversation. So thanks again, Carl, for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So why don't we start off pretty broadly? If you could just tell us a little bit about your background and how you even got into this role. And we're actually going to shut our video off now for a few minutes while you get going.
Yeah, and hopefully everybody, I don't know if everyone on the call here knows, but Slack is now a ubiquitous enterprise chat platform that pretty much every company that I know uses. Carl has been, not to steal your thunder, Carl, but Carl joined Slack way before they IPO'd. They are now a public company, public technology company. And we thought Carl would be an amazing first person for you to hear from. So you can hear from the front lines how somebody like him, a senior technical recruiter, is handling the current situation, how the dynamic is changing, and how all of you can be best prepared to acquire the right skills to be an attractive to an employer like Slack. So I'm going to stop talking now. Carl, please take it away. We have some questions prepared for you. We will be looking at the chat and asking more questions throughout the conversation. But why don't we start off with hearing a little bit about you and how you got into tech and then to Slack?
Sure. Thank you all for your time today. So my journey into tech started actually at the beginning of a previous crisis, right around the 2008 housing crisis. And I just say that just because of the times that we're in. But I originally got into tech roughly about 10 years ago, 2007, 2008. where a college buddy of mine, we're actually trying to create our own startup. And I'm dating myself by saying all this, but it is what it is. But we were actually creating our own startup, a tech startup that was based off of the social networking craze of like Facebook, and all the different apps that are kind of coming out at the time that are being popularized. And so I was essentially trying to create a professional social networking site with a college friend of mine. And that's what really kind of piqued my interest. I always kind of saw tech as I grew up on the East Coast and I went to school near Chicago. And so I'd always hear about like what was going on out like in Silicon Valley and all these different companies like of the time, the Facebooks, Googles, Airbnb was starting to come around the corner. There's just like so many different companies that were building all these amazing products and technologies. And so my colleague and I started to develop that interest, and we developed that professional social networking site. And so through that, that's why I really started learning more about the ins and outs of the technology industry, how people are building products, understanding like engineering, and like how do you work alongside with them when it comes to requirements and building something that starts from an idea into a functioning alpha product to a beta to actually launching it into production. And so like kind of learning the nuances of engineering and some of like the jargon that goes back and forth, with front end, back end, et cetera, everything that comes to powering an application. I started learning it then, and that kind of helped further my interest from there.
That's great. And a lot of you don't know this. Actually, nobody will know this, but Carl, we actually met you back in the day in Boston. You still look the same, actually, but we look a little bit older.
You look great. You two look great.
Oh, stop it. Thank you.
Keep it up.
But I'm curious, obviously, like me and Sergey, you had to navigate your career as well. You had to level up, and it sounds like you did that by trying to start your own companies. But what do you think you did that was different than what others were doing that helped you level up?
It's a great question. So back in the day when I was starting to do this, I was in the middle of starting this company, and I was also trying to think of ways to where like I could get closer to tech. Like I knew that I'm originally from Boston, which has its own rich kind of tech environment and community there. But I knew, like, just based on what I was reading, I knew there was a lot kind of going on out west in the Bay Area with everything that was kind of happening with innovation there. And so for me personally, it's not for everyone, but I was like, I want to make the move out west. I want to be like at the epicenter of where technology is happening, where people are coming with all these great ideas so that I can help further this startup that I had in mind. And so one of the creative ways that I did it, and this is like me just being a recruiter, was I tried to recruit myself into a job out there. And the way that I did that, I was living in Boston at the time. My college buddy was in Chicago, and I was going back and forth between those two areas. But a little nifty trick is I put my resume actually on all the major job boards. So Monster, again, I'm dating myself, but I put it on Monster, I put it up on Indeed. And what I actually did was I actually changed my address on my resume to the one friend that I had in all of California, who happened to live in Palo Alto here in the Bay Area, to his address. So what that allowed me to do was like having his address and his zip code there allowed my resume to not be seen by Boston recruiters and companies, but actually Bay Area companies and recruiters. And from there, I started getting hit up like almost immediately from people like from Google, from LinkedIn, for all these different like recruiter positions. Because at the time, I still needed a job in order to help fund these startups. So I actually used that as a kind of a creative tool, be kind of gaming the system to be able to get the type of leads I want in terms of opportunities there. So I found it to be really, really helpful and kind of like a nice little strategic play there. And then, yeah, that pretty much helped kind of open the door for me as far as like who's hiring for what, and how I could potentially be a fit, to help help me to make that move.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, anything you could do to give yourself a competitive advantage, you should do. You should not be afraid to do. One thing I did once to get a job is I found the CEO of the startup that had 6 people, and I just showed up at the event where he was tabling. And I talked to him. I said, hey, I have the sales skills. It was for a sales job. And I said, I've been doing sales for the last 10 months in exactly the same vertical that you're working in. I can help you out. And that turned into an interview, and that turned into a job. And I actually did the same thing as you. When I was moving from Boston to New York, I changed my address to my friend's address, and I started getting interviews too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a bit of a hack, but you're not lying per se. I mean, you can get there and do an interview if you need to.
Absolutely. And that was my mindset, was what can I do that's out of the box to get me, get people looking at me and attracted to my profile. And then once I had that mindset, I was like, I'm ready and willing to do whatever. Like, if you need me to fly cross country to interview, like, I'm ready to go. So like, I didn't want to have any hesitation. I wanted to make sure I was properly organized before doing all this, so that should someone start calling, I'm ready to go, and not like have any kind of doubt on whether, geography, being an issue.
Now,
So just being properly prepared was super helpful.
no, you're absolutely right. Once you started getting those interviews, do you recall, or do you have any maybe specific stories when you were going from your own company to trying to get a job? Was there anything specific that you did during the interview process that you used to convince the employer that they should hire you over somebody else? Maybe even given the fact that you didn't have as much experience maybe than somebody else?
Yeah. So one thing about my background is, like, I've been doing recruiting for a while. And at the time when I was living in Boston, I was still doing recruiting, but it wasn't necessarily technical recruiting. And so one could say that, like, yes, you know how to do like the baseline functionality of the role, but engineering is its own beast, and there's all this jargon and a different clientele altogether. And so what I did was I leveraged everything I knew. So my professional experience, working, in industry, but then also I talked about my startup that I was doing, and like how I was learning about the industry, how I was working with engineers, how I was essentially being like a product manager, like trying to take my business idea and getting that translated into actual engineering, when it comes to building a product, being able to take care of like front end and back end. And so like I was showing them like my ambition and like how I was willing to learn, and like just my own, natural aptitude for learning. And so like that was what I sold them on. It was like, I have the baseline knowledge of how to recruit, and I'm learning about how to build a tech company, or I'm learning about technology in general. This is why you should hire me. And like they appreciated that, and it showed that I was hustling. Like, I'm a hard worker with hard work ethic. And then like when I got them on the phone, I was like, hey, I'm in Boston, but hey, if you need me to come out to San Francisco in the next couple of days, I will make that happen. So like all of those things, I think they appreciated that level of hustle. And I think that's what it takes, being able to use all the tools in your tool belt to do so.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And, and I don't think that, everyone should be going out and starting startups, but I think a lot of people are afraid to use their personal experience and side projects to justify why they're good at something, even maybe though they didn't have a work experience in it. And if you're trying to transition into tech, the first question an employer is going to have, well, show me evidence of your interest, and that evidence could be anything. It could be you organized events. It could be you blogged about it. It could be that you tried starting a company, even if it didn't work out. But anything that can demonstrate you actually have interest in the field or in the specific vertical that you're going into, I think is critical to show if you don't have experience in that field. So I appreciate you telling that story, because I think it's so important.
Yes, absolutely. Use everything that you can. That's what people appreciate. That's like the nature of the technology industry in general, is who can innovate, who can be resourceful and hustle to make their ideas come true. Or, in your case, if you're looking for opportunities, find that opportunity and get hired in. So that's very much appreciated in the industry.
Now, obviously, as you know, you've been at this for a while. It's the hiring game and the recruiting game. There's some tactics that I think are always good to employ, but it constantly changes. So I wonder if you have any thoughts about, maybe like in the last, 6 or 7 years, are there any major differences that you can think of, or practices that are different now from how companies actually hire, or what they consider, let's say, a good employee or somebody that's employable? What has changed and what's different now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one thing that's remained the same is that it's fiercely competitive everywhere. Everyone's looking for talent, no matter where you are. And so that really hasn't waned at all. What has changed, I think, is the way that companies are approaching talent when it comes to attracting them to their specific companies. So what I mean by that is, like, I remember maybe like maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, companies were really really big into throwing money at employees or potential candidates. So being able to lure talent when it comes to like big sign-on bonuses and big salaries and employee referral programs that would offer like 10, 20K for every successful person that you bring in the door that we hire. And that was like a way of really being able to attract talent and being able to kind of throw money at the problem. But as we all know, money doesn't buy happiness. And I think that's something that was kind of just short-sighted. And what I've noticed recently over the past couple of years is like there's more of an emphasis. First of all, companies are a lot more judicious and more prudent with their finances, just given the state of markets now, with the way that tech has been performing within like both the private and the public markets. Companies are not just throwing around money anymore just for the sake of trying to get an engineer or a product manager person. So I think what you're seeing now is that companies are focusing a lot more like on workplace culture, and, in terms of like how do we build a place where people want to join, to where they feel warm and fuzzy when they're going through the interview process and actually coming on board as a hire. Like, how do we create like an inclusive culture where people can thrive and collaborate? So I think people are kind of doubling down on that. I also believe that people are relying more on their actual product and building a quality product and the quality team that could help, develop the product going forward. And the challenges that come with that, whether it be technical challenges or maybe like business challenges, as we know, a company continues to scale. And then like the growth opportunities, like what's in it for me, from year 0 to 1 and 1 to 2, like how can I grow this company? Those are some of the things I think are taking more precedent than just throwing money. And I mean, people are still being competitive with their offers in terms of cash and compensation, but I think you're seeing like those other factors really coming into play, because that's what matters at the end of the day. So that's what I've kind of noticed in my experiences. I've also seen like the emergence of like alternative hiring agencies. So you have your internal recruiting team that tries to find folks. You have external recruiting agencies that are trying to hire folks into companies. But you've also seen like coding boot camps and some of the inroads that they have into companies. So being able to kind of educate that workforce and then trying to use their connections and their resources to get people hired into some of their their big clients, so relationships that they have there. And there's also different avenues that kind of do like an alternative way of recruiting and finding talent. Like there's a company called Hired, where it's essentially like a engineering kind of like a auction for how to hire for talent. So there's different kind of avenues that come along that have developed over the past few years, as well as like just a change in mindset of how we're going to go looking at talent, not just throwing money at it, but thinking about like how are they going to thrive at our company.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because it's a competitive market in terms of there's a lot of other people that are going for the same role, but it's also a competitive market in that you want to hire the best people. And that's why in the past, maybe you would throw money at the problem, but you also prioritize referrals, which is why you would offer 20K per referral, because in the end of the day, there's just some inherent trust that comes with that can't be replaced, which is why anybody out there, if you're looking to get your foot in the door, referrals are still, I would say, a really great way to get ahead of the pack. Because if you have the skills, if you're good, you should be getting more opportunities. You should be getting more interviews. And if you aren't, then try to, hack your way into a company by building a relationship with somebody that's already there.
And by the way, referrals, for those people thinking, well, hey, if I want to get a job in Slack and I don't know anybody in Slack, how am I going to get a referral? There's a lot of ways you can do it. You might know someone that knows someone at Slack, and you might ask that person, hey, I'm just trying to find out what it's like to work at Slack. What do they look for, et cetera. Could you introduce me to John, who's working at Slack? I'd love to talk to them for 15 minutes. And 15 minutes, most people will say yes. And there you go. You just built a relationship with somebody at Slack, even though you didn't have it. So
absolutely.
So, Carl, my next question for you is obviously you're a technical recruiter, but I also know that you interface with other recruiters within the organization, and that there are other roles that are sought after. Obviously, Slack is one of those companies that is positioned to still be hiring right now because of the nature of what you all do. So I'm curious, other than engineering, what other type of talent would you say is the most sought after right now?
Yeah, great question. So I noticed within Slack and a lot of companies, like sales and go to market are still functions that are still highly prioritized in terms of opportunities. I think that, there's one side of it where it's engineering, where it's like we have to build the product. And then on the other side is like we need to sell the product. So sales, account executives, um, go to market folks. So like folks who are focusing on the marketing strategy and working both with internal resources and external resources and vendors to distribute the product. Those are definitely high in demand and much needed, especially within the tech industry, both private and public markets, where the emphasis is now shifting away from growth and more into like profitability. How can we actually have the dollars make sense? And so I think those two functions are highly sought after. I think another one that's kind of adjacent to that is customer success. So being able to, be the liaison between Slack, the company, or whatever, company X, and your clients, your customers, and being able to help them ensure that they have proper onboarding with your product. Okay, now they're properly onboarded. How do we get them to continue to do more of a deep dive into the product and unleash all the product offerings so they get the most out of it? Because that's kind of runs in line with sales and being able to make sure that like you can give them the product offering necessary so that they can be productive while trying to make the most out as far as like revenue with that client. And so so I think customer success is another big one. Marketing, again, that's kind of adjacent to the two that I mentioned before. I think design and product management are probably the other ones too. Being able to think about like how are you building a product that has users in mind, that makes it easy for users to navigate and to be able to unlock all of those different offerings that you have. And then the same with product management. And I think people are always kind of looking for folks that have that aptitude for both the business and the engineering side, to be able to make those ideas come to life, and being able to be like someone who can understand where the sales teams and marketing teams are coming from, user researchers on design, and be able to take that data and be able to essentially translate it over to the engineering team to build, various product features. And so I would say those are probably the main ones that are still in demand.
Yeah, that's great. Now, obviously, we're right now in a pretty unprecedented time, and we can all fully expect unfortunately, for a lot of companies to maybe be hiring fewer roles, or to maybe even having hiring freezes. From your perspective, not to ask you to make any predictions, but seeing kind of what's happening on the ground floor, and to whatever extent you can talk about what's actually happening at Slack, or what maybe you see at other companies as well. How do you think the current crisis will affect it? And do you think there are certain types of jobs? You mentioned customer success, product, digital marketing, or marketing in general, and a lot of those engineering roles. Do you see certain roles being more likely to still have a lot of vacancies that companies like Slack want to fill, as opposed to other roles which may slow down in hiring during the crisis right now?
Yeah. So I think that the way that we are communicating right now, I think this is like kind of the future of work. It revolves around being able to be flexible with your workforce, to have them anywhere in the world, being able to use products like Slack or Zoom to be able to facilitate that conversation, just like how we're doing right now. I think this is really where it's kind of coming to. And I think with that, it's a benefit for companies because it allows them to have an expanded pool as far as like talent to choose from, versus just like having like more targeted pool. Like we just need folks in San Francisco or in New York to work here. You can be a lot more distributed, which allows them to be flexible in that regard. It also eases the cost burden, because talent in New York is different than talent in, I don't know, in Europe or in South America or wherever the case may be. And so there may be an easier way to kind of hire folks from a financial standpoint there. So I think this is kind of the future of work and where we're headed in some form or fashion. And I think hopefully with the, as we get out of this whole thing, you'll see more kind of flexibility around remote working and seeing opportunities where remote work is more of an option versus we have this one unicorn hire and like we're willing to make an exception. I think you're going to see more of that happen where people are going to be open to that idea just because of what we're going through right now. And then in terms of opportunities that may come about that are friendly to it, I think that, customer success is a great role to be able, that I think it will be kind of remote friendly and office agnostic. Same with sales. I believe areas like product management may be a little bit harder just because like you are interfacing with so many people internally. But I don't think it's like the end all be all in that regard. I think marketing could have a chance to be able to be like a remote type of role too. And so I think there's flexibility there. I think, we're all kind of learning right now. And I think that some of those opportunities where you can, especially where in engineering, you're primarily writing code all day. So you could essentially do it anywhere in the world. Same with sales. I mean, although it does help for you to have like that actual physical face-to-face, but, especially if you're doing sales and the company's growing, you have customers all over the country, you can't be there face-to-face all the time. And so I think that you'll see like those type of occupations and everything that's kind of adjacent to that be pretty friendly towards remote work and like just workplace collaboration.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, I think you would agree with me, but there's certain roles as well, like sales, like customer success and account management, where there are usually more vacancies because you need more people to do that job, right? You're generating revenue, you're managing relationships. Something like product management is inherently, there's going to be less of those jobs out there. And I'm assuming you guys have way less product managers than you do salespeople.
Yes, that is true. We're hiring for product, but we are definitely hiring for sales. And that's been like a big initiative at Slack over the past, since the beginning of the year, really, is that like even before COVID-19, is that we were going to make a huge push for sales in our small medium business markets all the way up to enterprise level. That was going to be like a big initiative for this year. And I think that will continue to be the case. Like, and we're just, for example, we're hiring all over the world, at Slack for sales and customer success to be able to support those regions of the world.
That's great to hear. So I just want to make sure that we start addressing some of the questions that are coming in here in the chat. And I think this is a good one. Shankar asked, what advice do you have for someone who looks senior on a resume, but is applying for a slightly junior role? And his question is actually, or her question is specific to a different function than what they have already been in.
A different function than they've already been in.
So they don't have as much experience necessarily in that role, and that's why they might look a little bit more senior with other experience under their belt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think if anything, if there's a way that you can show, if you could tell the story in your resume of like how your skills can translate over into the new role, I think that just makes it that much easier. Especially as a recruiter, like whenever I'm reviewing a resume, I'm always trying to understand what is the story that this resume is telling me. And like I could start from top to bottom, but I always go bottom up. So like, what were you doing in your previous life to make you even want to apply for this role and for this opportunity? And how does it align? And so if you're able to tell that story pretty clearly, I think that makes it that much easier. And then like, I mean, when you're telling that story consists of what type of projects are you doing? How are you getting involved in the industry? Maybe it's through meetups or you're volunteering at various conferences. Things of that nature help provide like the supporting evidence necessary to make that call and to make that story as clear as possible for a recruiting team or an HR team.
Very interesting. And I agree with you 100%. Your narrative is incredibly important. And you, by the way, have the opportunity to change your narrative at any time. Our backgrounds are usually much richer than what can be captured in a resume.
And when you're applying for a specific job, that's why it's much better, in my opinion, to have a targeted list of companies and positions that you want, other than as opposed to spraying and praying. Because if you have specific things that you've identified, or roles that you want, or companies that look exciting to you because you love their culture and what they're doing, then you can customize your approach, customize your narrative, build relationships in that company, and get in that way. So I agree with you 100%.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. The spray and pray approach, in my opinion, doesn't really work. And if you can tailor your message to a given company, and if you have a short list of that, I think you're in better position. And one way that you can help tailor your story is, if you have a short list of companies and you see that they're hiring for X role that you're interested in, is try to like look at that job description and try to think of like examples of how, for each of the bullet points in the job description, of how like that aligns across. So look at that, like look at the job description as kind of a reference guide or a North Star to like how you should be positioning your resume and your story as you're applying it for those roles. I think that's a good kind of mental exercise that helps you to think one-to-one, so that like you can have more of a direct hit versus the spray and pray method.
And do you find, when you see people that seem a little bit more senior going for a junior role because they're changing, let's say, careers, or they're changing maybe the industry that they're in, do you find that, like, is it a consideration for a recruiter that, hey, they might be too expensive, and, we might, maybe we'll disqualify them before even interviewing them because they're going to expect a higher salary than this junior role can pay?
No, I don't think so. I think a good recruiter and a good recruiting team will understand. Will first be able to glean the resume and understand, like, okay, this is how it is a fit, and then being able to set up a call afterwards to really dive deep into those areas. Anything that may be a potential like yellow flag, or just like just an area that they want to dig into further. I think that if the resume makes sense, that they'll be willing to kind of do that detective work to see if the motivations align, and just understanding like just the idea as far as why they're searching in the first place and why they're looking to make such a career move.
Yeah.
That's why I say I think it's very important for you to be very clear, in that resume story that you're telling, and being, just making sure that that's aligned one-to-one as much as possible.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think Carl, when you say the resume makes sense, like, folks on the call realize that if you're changing careers, you're keeping your resume and the language in your resume exactly the same, and you're not adjusting it to the language that's accepted in those roles. Like, you can adjust, you can adjust an account management role to sound more like a customer success role because they're actually pretty similar, right?
Yes.
So look at those job ads, see the kind of words they use in the job ads, and change the words in your resume to more closely match that rather than what you're used to in your resume. And then your resume actually starts making more sense for that job.
Yeah, it's the same principle that we talked about earlier about like being able to hack your way through and being resourceful. Like, use all the information that you have to best present your case, and that'll put you in a better position than others.
So the next question I have is, I'm going to actually slightly add to the question from SG, which was, what if what if you have some experience? Let's say you're a senior product manager, but most of your experience has been in a B2B capacity, in business to business, right? Dealing with an enterprise level product, for example, and you want to transition to be a product manager in a B2C capacity. And another parallel I'll draw is another student that I was talking to a few days ago, someone that's been a really successful project manager in the nonprofit space, but wants to become a project manager now in tech. So you have the skills, you have the experience, but now you want to apply them to a different industry or a different context. What do you think about that? What advice do you have for those people?
I would say that, if it's transferable like that, there is a chance. I do understand that they are different clients, in terms of what you're dealing with. I would say there was an idea. We had a meetup at Slack, I think it was maybe like a year ago, where it's like it's the idea of intrapreneurship. And it's the idea of doing the job that you want within the current job that you have. So I don't know if there's anything, SG, that you can do in your current role where you can start doing like B2C type of work in terms of, I don't know, the scope of work, the type of requirements, but there's certain projects that you could take on in your current role and actually in making sure that aligns with your company and their business initiatives and objectives. I would say try to take that on. And like, without necessarily quitting your job and applying for new roles, hoping to go into a different vertical market. If there's anything that you can do in your current role to be able to build up that skill set and build that muscle, I'd highly suggest doing that. And that's kind of like a nice little creative way to do the job without quitting your job.
Yeah, I like that advice a lot. The other thing that I've done in the past is I've helped my friends in the startups that they were working at in doing some of that function. So for me, it was for sales. Before I had any sales experience, I was not able to get a single sales interview because I was coming from finance. So what I did is I luckily had a cousin who just raised a little bit of money. And right after work, I'd go to his office down the street in Boston, and I would do cold calling for him to the West Coast. And it was free. He didn't pay me, but he had his manager or his VP of sales sitting there giving me feedback on how terrible I was on the phones, right? And that's how I picked up that skill, doing it for free. So you can do it for others. You can even do it for yourself. You can start, let's say, some kind of small consumer-based website, for example, or app that you build yourself, or partner with a friend to do and get experience that way. The other thing I would recommend is start talking to people in the role that you want to get at other companies, just so you can even start to understand what they value, right? So for example, for a product manager, obviously, on the B2C side, looking at data and making decisions based on lots of data and information is something that's unique to that role. So talking to more and more of those types of people can be really helpful.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. I mean, use your network to see how you can learn more insights about a given industry or a given, role that's open. There for a reason, a 15-minute call, no one's going to say no to that. And so that's a chance for you to build relationships and learn more and see what you can do. And volunteering, if you can, like these are the type of things that you have to kind of do to kind of pay it forward. That kind of are, it's kind of tough. You're hustling and you're not necessarily getting paid for it, but if you're able to show that ambition and do the work and network with folks, I think it'll pay off in the end for sure.
Yeah, and I think your idea about entrepreneurship, and especially if you work in a bigger company, trying to meet people in other departments that you don't normally interface with to get opportunities there, can be really helpful. The next question is from Alia. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing, but I really like this question, and it's actually in line with what I was going to ask you next, anyways. And that is this: if I'm coming from a totally different non-tech industry, what types of transferable skills do you think are valued? I'm trying to figure out which skills to highlight that the industry would value, since my background is unique, unconventional for tech. So what skills are transferable and what skills are valued? And the way I was going to ask that question is, what soft skills are valued, maybe, because those are typically the first things that you think when you think about transferable skills. But if they're coming from a non-tech background, what is valued? And maybe you can think about a specific example of somebody that you saw apply to Slack recently, maybe even that you talked to.
Yeah. So what is valuable is like hustle for sure. Hustle and grind. I'll provide an example, but I just want to give you some of the transferable skills. Someone who can hustle, someone who shows that and demonstrates that, someone who has grit to kind of know like, hey, I'm not getting paid for this because I've been volunteering in this other role for the past 6 months on top of my job. That certainly helps. The idea of teamwork and collaboration. How do you collaborate with people on a given team? That's something that we value a lot at Slack, and that's actually part of one of our interview slots across the company. Is called teamwork and collaboration. So working on your team and how do you work cross-functionally with others, and like company values, like how do the company's values align with your own values and what you're looking for in your next role. And so one example that comes to mind is it's actually a New York example. We hired, Slack has a New York office, and we were hiring for a front-end engineer. And one of the people that we brought on actually had a background that was non-tech. She was actually a fitness instructor for like a luxury, I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but it's like a luxury fitness company that she was working at. And then before that, she was an assistant director at a math learning center in New Jersey. And she had no tech background at all. She got into tech because like she's always had an interest in math. She was actually tutoring as an assistant director at that math company, at that math center. And she actually was, she enrolled in a boot camp. And while she was doing that, she was building apps for the boot camp, because it's like part of your prerequisites. But she was also building her own fitness app on the side on top of that all, to be able, and it was a fitness app that kind of helped you locate various fitness studios within the New York, New Jersey metro area. And that's an example of someone who's hustling and who's showing grit. Like, they're not getting paid for this. They're doing this on top of their current job and the boot camp that they're doing, to be able to make that happen. And so her resume was always interesting. We just happened to have an opening. She was interviewing for like an associate front end engineer position. And that's something that kind of stuck out to us, was like, this is someone who's been doing all this over the past year or so. And, I think this is someone who may be a good fit for this opening. And that was something that was kind of transferable. We could see right away that she was hustling and that she was gritty enough to kind of go through this. And then like the interview kind of showed like that teamwork and collaboration, the ability to kind of work in various settings. We're talking about essentially academia, fitness, and then she's going to a coding boot camp, with other folks. Like, how are you able to work with all these different types of people? What are the good, bad, and ugly situations and scenarios that come up? How have you learned from that? And how have you matured as an engineer, as a professional? Like, those are things that we ask during our interview slots at Slack, and something that was very much representative in her background. So those are some of the things I think are very much transferable. And if you can demonstrate that, objectively with your work experience or volunteering, or, maybe you're an engineer, you're doing stuff on GitHub, showing those projects off, or maybe it's like product management and you're involved in different product management, like meetups or whatever the case may be, that stands out. And I think that's a compelling story to tell.
That's a great point. You have to be able to demonstrate in a tangible way that you've actually worked towards whatever role you want ultimately. And most employers realize, I think, that there's going to be some training involved. There's going to be some ramp up period. But if you can show that you've already at least done some of that work beforehand, that you already committed to it, and that you're a problem solver and all these different things that you said, that you can function in a collaborative environment, you're that much more likely to get that opportunity. Because at the end of the day, companies just need people that can solve problems for them. And they need people that can solve problems in specific functions, but also they can solve problems broadly that can help move the company forward, that can help other employees, and ultimately be an asset to the organization. So if you can prove that in your conversation, in your messaging, you're much more likely to get the opportunity.
Absolutely. And the idea of, creating that short list of companies and talking to people, try to identify what the opportunities are and like if they're hiring. So if you're someone who's coming new into tech and you want to make that transition, like, just be mentally prepared that it may take 6 months, 12 months in order to find that role. But if you're talking to someone now, hey, do you know if they have any opportunities like that are coming up this year or the next few months? That'll help you get ready for those opportunities when the doors are open. So, it's not like it's going to happen overnight. It may happen overnight, but, be prepared to put in that work in terms of networking, getting to know people and knowing like, how are they hiring? What type of profile they're hiring for, so that when they do, they can refer you in and you can shine, thereafter.
Yeah, and you never know which conversation, which new approach, which initiative is going to actually turn into an opportunity, which is why you have to continue pushing forward and trying. But something that you mentioned actually in your last statement is how you kind of tested for this stuff during the interview process. Can you talk about that a little bit right now? Once somebody actually lands an interview with you at Slack or with other members of the team at Slack, how do you test for some of these skills? How do you make sure that they are that much more likely to be successful in the role during the interview process?
Sure. I'll talk about it from the engineering perspective and then try to give you the non-engineering perspective. But the same thing applies. And what I love about the Slack interview process, and what every candidate I've ever talked to has ever said, is that our process is not like it's a behavioral interview process. So this is not the type of like Google, Facebook interview where it's like, tell me every algorithm and data structure to show me like why you're right for this job or why you're not right for this job. it's very much based off of like tangible work experience. So the way that it's designed is that typically, like within engineering, we have 4 different slots. There's 2 technical slots, and then there's 2 kind of soft skills slots. And those soft skills slots are, one is teamwork and collaboration, and the other one's like a hiring manager interview. Despite the slots, they're all asking like questions that are there to promote technical conversation. They aren't like whiteboard questions where it's like, again, tell me every algorithm that you know, or this is actually a gotcha situation. Can you find the gotcha? Like, it's very much like, okay, if you're going to build, how do you build, like for front end, how do you build a front end architecture? Tell me about how you do it in your current role. What are some of the technical trade-offs you had to do in your current role to make that project work? You know, and it's really around like asking tangible questions, so things that are directly applicable to one's own experience day to day. And so that's really helpful. It promotes like a really high quality candidate experience, because people walk away being like, this is amazing. I never had companies actually ask me these type of questions. They really get a good sense as far as who the person is as a candidate, and the candidate has a good sense as far as how the company thinks about these things overall. And the same thing goes like with the other, like the teamwork and collaboration, the hiring manager interviews. Like those are ones where it's like, tell me about a time when you and another engineer had to work on a project that had like ambiguous requirements. How'd you go about building that product? What were some of the trade-offs? Knowing what you know now, what would you do differently? So it allows you to like think about like utilizing all of your domain expertise to kind of properly answer that question and provide a thoughtful response. And same with hiring manager interview. It's like, okay, walk me through your resume. How'd you get into engineering? Why are you interested in engineering? Or maybe in this case, product or business, sales. Well, how do Slack's values align with what you're looking for in your next company? So these are all points that you can talk to. There's no gotcha. There's no like brain teaser or anything like that. It's very much like you talking about your day to day and how you are right for the role, and how you're learning as an engineer or as a salesperson or as a product management person. So I actually find that to be one of my biggest selling points is the actual candidate interview process at Slack. And I think it's the best one I've ever seen at any company I've worked for. And I've literally had every candidate tell me that, whether they got in the job or not, they've been like, this is the best process I've ever seen. Thank you. So keep that in mind.
Dewashish asked an interesting question. I don't know if my answer to this is going to be biased compared to yours, but when you're looking for a new role, he's specifying junior role. I don't know if it necessarily matters, but is it a good idea to reach out to directly the team manager or the hiring manager, or the human resource or the HR rep or the recruiting rep in the company if it's big enough? What are your thoughts on that?
To be honest, I don't think it's a good idea, just because as recruiters and even hiring managers, but more so recruiters, we're getting bombarded all the time. I see like hundreds of resumes a day. So just multiply that out even like over a week or a month. So to reach out directly, it has to be like really spot on for me to respond and like want to like see how it may be a fit. To be honest, I think the best way to go about it is to find people that you know that work within that company, or people who know people who work in that company. And like we said before, being able to build that relationship, take them out to coffee, or in this case, virtual coffees via Zoom, and like really build a relationship there so that person can refer you in. Because I'll be honest with you, like I get hit up by various folks over LinkedIn all the time. And first of all, it's hard because like a lot of them will hit me up without any context onto why they're hitting me up. So that right there is kind of like an initial orange flag, red flag, if you will. And then aside from that, it's just kind of, I don't know, like a bit interruptive and obtrusive, just because I'm getting candidates from all different buckets and outlets all the time. And so it's my job to be able to kind of efficiently filter through the folks who are good fits and who they're not. And so it's just better to have you come into like one general area. So for us, like through our job board, to be able to sift through folks and be able to assess the fit that way. And so I think it's best if you're able to build relationships with folks through your shortlist, that'll be a lot better way. Because I mean, I've seen it and I do it where it's like I can go through 500 resumes in a given day or within a given week. But if I see who's been referred in, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and I'm going to look at that resume, because that holds more weight. There's a relationship there, and they can provide context to something that maybe I don't see. And I'm able to get that quick, fast answer and that kind of that relationship and that rapport through that introduction, that referral, that allows me to stop what I'm doing and actually address that right away.
Absolutely. And look, if you don't have any inroads to a company, you have no contacts, you don't know someone who knows someone who knows someone, and you have to reach out cold, why not reach out to a person that already has that job in the company, right? If you're looking for a junior PM role or project manager role or something, reach out to somebody in the company that has that role. Odds are they're not getting bombarded by emails from others, and ask them, hey, what's your experience like in this job? What did you do to become an attractive candidate? How did you get in? And if they like you, eventually you can ask for an introduction to somebody for a role at the hiring, and odds are you will, at least they will send an email on your behalf. So that could be one way.
Yeah. And one thing that you could do is, and I do this for candidates, like whenever I'm reaching out, or even just folks in general, like on LinkedIn that I'm connecting with, is like I always write a personal note, like on why I'm trying to connect with them. That goes a long way, because it shows at least you're trying. You're not just doing like a spray and pray like we talked about earlier. You're actually being thoughtful for like that 5 minutes to write me a note on why you want to connect. So yeah, maybe if it's like a product manager or a salesperson or, a marketing person, like, hi, marketing person, my name is so-and-so. This is why I wanted to reach out to you. I'd love to connect. And if you're open, I'm open. I'd love to maybe talk to you for 15 minutes about why I want to join your company. Like, that is a thoughtful response that it's hard for people to say no to, because at least you're trying and you're making the effort.
I want to be cognizant of your time when we're coming up on 7 o'clock, but one thing I did want to address, since you just mentioned looking at 100 or 500 resumes or cover letters, when you have so many potential candidates to look at, if you were to say maybe one or two things, what makes somebody stand out? Is it in their cover letter? Is it in their resume? I mean, aside from somebody that came in through referral, which is clearly one of the more effective ways to get your foot in the door, but if you're just looking at pieces of paper, what makes somebody stand out?
What makes someone stand out is the ability to show like what they're directly contributing to day to day. Like, one thing, it sounds very much like a no-brainer, but I see it countless times where it's like, I am a part of a team where we built so-and-so like product, that like, that's somewhat helpful for me to understand, like, you're part of a department or a team that's working on it, but like, what are you actually contributing to day to day? Like, being able to outline that clearly and concisely with nice bullet points and nice kind of like organization with your resume, to be able to show like, this is what I'm contributing to day to day. These are the impacts of what I'm doing day to day or having on the business. These are the tools and technologies I'm using to do this day to day project. And like, this is how I am collaborating, and how I'm collaborating with various folks on my team, on cross-functional teams, with my managers and leadership. Like, if you're able to kind of concisely show that presents a really good story. That's part of the storytelling right there, versus just like kind of generic bullet points that say, I was a part of a team that helped build this Gmail widget, the send button for Gmail. Like, that doesn't tell me anything.
And I think that's even more important if you're applying for a role at a smaller company, because I look at resumes all the time, personally. There's no automated machine that disqualifies people. I'm looking at every single one personally. And if the cover letter is relevant, if it shows passion, if it shows that somebody went on the website and actually looked at what it is I'm hiring for, looked at what the mission and the values of the company are, I'm almost guaranteed to offer that person, at the very least, an opportunity to talk to me. So I think you're absolutely right. That's incredibly important.
Yeah, those company values. That's why companies have like that About Us page. They have their mission listed on their job board. Like, that is, again, you being resourceful and using the information in front of you to make your case. So that's a great chance for you to apply that to the cover letter, and during your recruiter phone screen, and throughout the process thereafter.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. One thing I want to add before we end this first inaugural class is, there's actually a question from Ray that I want to address that I think is going to be relevant for a lot of people. Ray is a teacher nearing retirement, worries that his age may limit his ability to break into tech. And I think that for a lot of folks, whether it's age, whether it's lack of specific experience in that job, it's a little scary. You know, you're competing against people that may have more experience in that vertical. You're competing with people that may look like better candidates on paper. So how do you stand out? It is a challenge, and for everybody that's going to be a different answer. But I would say, you know, Ray, you mentioned that you were a teacher for a number of years, 18 years, 20 years experience in radio and television. I can guarantee you that there are specific companies who really want somebody that either has 18 years of teaching experience or 20 years of radio or television experience. And so instead of applying maybe to tech companies that, you know, maybe it's Slack, right? I mean, maybe you could make a great candidate that's Slack, but you have a higher likelihood at getting hired at a startup, for example, that is in the TV or radio space, or is creating a product or service for teachers, because then you understand the customer intimately more than anybody else, and therefore your resume will stand out. So for anybody on this call, think about it. To increase your likelihood of breaking into a technology job if you don't have that experience, use your previous experience, your know-how, your passion for an industry, and apply to jobs that actually care about having people on a team that may have experience and knowledge in that industry, even if they don't have, you know, the specific tech knowledge just yet. So that's just kind of a final tip.
Absolutely.
I wanted to guys with.
Yeah, it's a great one-to-one fit potentially there. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Carl, thank you so much for being our first instructor, for sharing your first of all your story, but also the tremendous viewpoint that you have as a technical recruiter at a tech company that is hiring right now. There are plenty of companies that are hiring right now, so we appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your expertise. And thank you for everybody that joined this call. We're sharing our screen right now just to show you this survey. Again, the survey itself will take a minute to fill out, school16.co/survey. We'll also send it in an email, but we need to hear from you guys so we can understand, you know, what was valuable from this session. What would you like to see more of? The different types of sessions that you want, because we want to make this program better and better for you. So we want to hear directly from you, and in exchange, we will send you the notes from this show. Please continue to come to these weekly sessions. They will continue to be free, and we want to see you on these calls. And if you didn't get your question answered, we're going to try to answer them for you. Email us at info@school16.co. That goes directly to Vadim and I. We will check those emails, and if we can answer, we will try and answer your questions if we didn't get to it today.
And next week, we have Daisy DePaulis of Google Cloud that's going to be speaking to you all. We're excited to bring her. But Carl, this was really amazing and incredibly insightful. I mean, I hope people understand that they literally got insights into what somebody only gets when they actually get an interview opportunity at Slack. So most people will never find this information anywhere else. So Carl, I really, really appreciate you being really transparent with everybody here.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time, everyone. And Slack is hiring globally, worldwide. So we're not slowing down. If you are, I don't know, Asia, North America, Europe, we're hiring all over the place. You can check it out on our careers page.
Thank you, Carl. Someone said in capital letters, please make more videos every day, all day. I don't know if we can do this all day, but we're going to do as much as we can. Thank you so much, folks, for coming, and we're looking forward to seeing you at next week's session. Thank you so much, Carl.
All right. Thank you all. Take care.